My name is Irene Woulette, and I'm 32 years old. As an orthopedic surgeon, I'm used to seeing the fine line between life and death every day. But no emergency could have prepared me for the moment 5 months ago. 5 years ago, my sister told our parents a lie. A cruel, sophisticated and perfectly crafted lie that robbed me of my entire family. They cut off contact. They blocked my phone number. They treated me like a ghost, a stain on the family's honor. They didn't attend my residency graduation where I stood on the podium as valedictorian. They weren't at my wedding, leaving an entire row of seats reserved for the bride's family empty. For 5 long years, I lived like an orphan, a daughter without roots. Then one stormy night, last month, an emergency was brought to the hospital by ambulance. The patient was a woman who had been in a serious car accident, suffering multiple injuries, severe blood loss, deep coma, and was dying. The panicked nurses called the head of trauma surgery. That was me. As the operating room doors automatically opened, I strode purposefully toward the stretcher. In the brightly lit hallway, my mother sat sobbing in the waiting area. When she looked up, her eyes met the gold-embroidered name tag on my white lab coat, Dr. Irene Woulette, head of surgery. She was stunned. Her face turned pale, her eyes wide, as if she had seen a dead person come back to life. She clutched my father's hand beside her so tightly that her trembling fingers dug into his flesh, leaving deep bruises. The girl they abandoned for dropping out of school and being rebellious is now the only one holding their beloved daughter's life in her hands. A moment of calm before the storm. Before I take you deeper into the dark side of this story, please take a second to like and subscribe to the channel. But only do so if this story truly touches a hidden corner of your heart. And don't forget to leave your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where you are at the moment I reveal this truth. Now let me take you back to the fall of 2019, to an oak dining table in Hartford, Connecticut. That was the last time in my life my father looked at me with a look that held a hint of pride. Growing up in the Woulette family home with 2 daughters, there had long been an unwritten rule only one truly existed. My older sister Monica was 3 years older than me. She was born a star, a natural center of attention. From school plays and student council meetings to dinner parties, Monica always knew how to make herself the center of attention. She could chat with any adult, crack witty jokes, and make them laugh uncontrollably. My parents, Jerry and Diane Woulette, were middle-class and down-to-earth people from Hartford. My father ran a manufacturing plant, and my mother worked as a part-time accountant. They worshipped 2 things in life: glamorous appearances and absolute obedience. Monica fulfilled both perfectly, like a pre-programmed doll. And me, I was a quiet shadow. I was a child buried in my thick biology textbook even on Thanksgiving night, oblivious to Monica's laughter echoing from the living room. I wasn't rebellious. I wasn't demanding. I was simply invisible. There's a cruel difference between being forgotten and never seen. In 8th grade, I was the only student in my school to make the finals at the state science fair. I'd stayed up countless nights working on that biology model. And coincidentally, that weekend was Monica's community play premiere. Guess where my parents were? As I trudged home on the bus with my second prize ribbon in hand, my dad just glanced at the newspaper, uttering a dismissive remark. "Well done, Renai." He didn't ask what my project was. He never did. Never. I taught myself to hold back my tears. I told myself I was okay. I didn't need that cheap attention. I channeled all my resentment and longing into grades, into AP classes, into scholarship applications. I thought if I can't be the child they love, I'll be the child they're forced to look up to. And in a brief moment of brilliance, I thought I'd succeeded. The day the acceptance letter from Oregon Health and Science University, OHSU, 3,000 miles from Hartford, arrived, the entire Woulette household was shaken. It was a Tuesday in April. I remember it vividly because Monica had come home from Stamford that weekend. She was 22, working as a marketing coordinator with a stable salary. Good was Monica's limit. She would never admit to being just average, even if she died. My father took the letter, put on his glasses, and read it aloud at the dinner table. His eyebrows raised an expression rarely seen. Oregon Health and Science University, that's real medical school. Then he lowered the paper, looked me straight in the eye, a direct, unwavering gaze, and said, "Perhaps you'll amount to something after all this, Renai." It wasn't exactly a standard compliment. It still carried the bitter taste of doubt, but for a child yearning for affection like I was, then it was like a life-saving breath of oxygen in the middle of the ocean. That evening, my mother seemed like a different person. She was constantly on the phone. She called Aunt Ruth her sister, even the neighbor 3 houses away. My Irene got into a prestigious medical school. Can you believe it? Her voice resonated with a tone I hadn't heard in 18 years. Pride. A pure, unhidden pride, and it was directed at me. During dinner that night, I inadvertently glanced at Monica across from me. She was smiling. But as someone who studied anatomy, I recognized that smile as disgusting. The facial muscles tensed, the corners of her lips curled up, but her eyes were icy cold. Monica's eyes weren't smiling at all. They were constantly moving, calculating, weighing, and rearranging a new gamble. At the time, I was too naive to understand the look in the eyes of a predator whose glory had been stolen. I simply thought she was tired from the long bus ride. After that week, Monica suddenly became a perfect older sister. She called me regularly 2 or 3 times a week. Her voice was strangely sweet. "How's your packing going? What's your roommate like? Is Portland very cold?" When I started college, she meticulously inquired about my study schedule, clinical exams, the names of the strict professors, and even my classmates. She remembered every name, every little detail I inadvertently mentioned. I cried with emotion. I thought, so my success has made my sister respect me more, so we can become real sisters. But little did I know that every story I told, every pressure I shared, was a bullet I was handing to Monica. I was providing her with a weapon to self-destruct, and I did it with a foolishly grateful smile. Things went on like that until my 3rd year of medical school, a pivotal year, and also when hell officially opened its doors. My roommate and my only support in Portland was Sarah Mitchell. Sarah was a resilient girl raised in an orphanage with no relatives. She was my lifeline through my freshman depressions. I remember one week of maddeningly grueling surgery exams. I called home exhausted, sobbing uncontrollably on the phone. My mother only answered for 30 seconds before cutting me off. "I can't talk right now, Renai. Monica's having a terrible day at work. She's very stressed." They hung up. That night, it was Sarah who sat down on the cold floor with me, put her arm around my shoulder, and said in a harsh voice, "It's their loss, Irene. Now wipe your tears and get up. We have a whole corpse to memorize tonight. You have to be a doctor." Sarah was my only family in Portland, but cruel fate spared no unfortunate soul. Midway through my 3rd semester, Sarah began losing weight drastically and experiencing excruciating abdominal pain. When the test results came back, my world completely collapsed. Sarah was diagnosed with an advanced terminal illness. And that was when Monica found the perfect loophole to carry out her wicked plan. Sarah's correct diagnosis on her medical record was peripheral T-cell lymphoma, an extremely aggressive form of blood cancer. The night she received the results, Sarah didn't cry. She just looked out the hospital window, where Portland rain was tearing through the night, and whispered, "Irene, I don't have money. I don't have family insurance. I'm going to have to drop out of school." "No." I gripped her thin hand, my voice trembling but firm. "You're not going anywhere. I'll manage. We'll get through this together." In my panic and despair, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I called Monica. Sobbing, I told her about Sarah's condition, about my extra night shifts at a private clinic to help pay for her expensive chemotherapy bills, and about having to ask the administration to postpone some clinical exams so I could be by her bedside. I was just seeking advice or a little sympathy from my own sister. But on the other end of the line, Monica was silent for a long time. Her sigh over the phone then, now that I think about it, sounded like the laughter of a devil. "Oh, my poor Irene," Monica whispered. "Don't worry, I won't tell Mum and Dad. Just focus on Sarah." She kept her word. She didn't say anything about Sarah. She replaced Sarah with me. A month later, I received a phone call from my father. There was no greeting, only a deafening roar over the phone. "You disgrace. This family has no room for a deceitful, depraved daughter like you." I was stunned. "Dad, what are you saying? What did I do?" "Are you still denying it?" My mother's voice interrupted, choked with sobs and disgust. "Monica saw everything. She came to Portland to surprise you, and she saw you dropped out of school 2 months ago. You used the tuition money your parents sent to support another girl, and then you two moved out and lived a wild life together. You worked at those illegal clinics to make money for your partying, didn't you?" It felt like a lightning bolt struck me. "No, it was Sarah, my roommate, has cancer. I was just working part-time to—" "Shut up," my father yelled, cutting me off. Monica confronted the medical school's training office. "They confirmed you've been suspended. Your sister even photographed a stack of hospital bills in your name, including the address of the apartment you shared with that girl. How dare you use my hard-earned money to do such depraved things?" I yelled into the phone, trying to explain that I only postponed my exams, not dropped out, that those bills were under my name as a guarantor for Sarah. But it was too late. Monica had orchestrated a perfectly orchestrated play. She flew to Portland, using the pretext of being a family member, to inquire at the school office while I was on duty. She collected all my exam suspension papers and hospital bills, then concocted a disgusting story. Irene was gay, defrauded her parents, and dropped out of prestigious medical school to pursue a life of debauchery. For a family obsessed with fame and prestige like my parents, Monica's lie was a fatal blow. And the one delivering the blow was Monica, their obedient, perfect daughter. They completely believed her. "Listen carefully, Irene." My father's voice was chillingly cold, the coldness of a death sentence. "From today on, I consider Monica my only child. Never show your face in this house again." Beep, beep, beep. All communication was cut off. My phone number was blocked. My tuition support bank account was frozen immediately. They vanished from my life as if they had never existed. 2 months later, Sarah died in my arms. She passed away on a rainy day, leaving me alone in the world, without family, without money, bearing the stigma of being an outcast. But they didn't know one thing: their cruelty didn't kill me. It nurtured within me a monster of resilience. 5 years passed. 5 years I worked as a waitress, stayed up all night, studying, borrowed hundreds of thousands of dollars to complete my medical program, and then threw myself into 36-hour shifts during my residency. I cried until my tears ran dry on graduation day, watching my friends being hugged by their parents while my chair remained completely empty. I walked down the aisle alone on my wedding day, holding my husband's hand without a single blessing from my parents. Until that night, the ambulance siren ripped through the quiet of the University of Oregon Hospital. The sound of the stretcher wheels rolling rapidly across the tiled floor was a harsh, dry noise. Dr. Woulette. Special emergency from the highway, multiple vehicle accident, female patient approximately 35 years old, ruptured organs, severe internal bleeding, blood pressure plummeting, the head nurse shouted through the intercom. I pressed the button to open the operating room door, pulled up my medical mask, my eyes as sharp as a razor. But as soon as I stepped into the waiting area to receive patients, my steps suddenly halted. Under the hospital's stark white LED lights, two familiar figures sat slumped on the floor. My father, his hair now grey, was embracing my mother, who was sobbing uncontrollably, her clothes stained with the blood of her beloved daughter. As my footsteps and those of the medical team approached, my mother lifted her tear-streaked face. Her gaze shifted from my surgical shoes to my white lab coat embroidered with gold lettering, Dr. Irene Woulette, head of orthopedic trauma surgery, and finally settled on my face. She was stunned. Her lips trembled, parted, but no sound came out. She looked at me as if she had seen a ghost from hell. In an unconscious reflex, she clutched my father's arm so tightly that her fingertips, white with age, dug into his flesh. My father looked up the critical condition report in his hand, clattering to the floor. Irene, my mother whispered, her voice filled with shock guilt and a pathetic plea. I didn't look at them. My gaze swept over them, cold as the Arctic ice, then settled on the woman lying on the stretcher, her breath barely perceptible through the oxygen mask, her face disfigured by blood and cuts. It was Monica, their perfect older sister, the one who had stolen my family, lay there, her life hanging by a thread. And the only person in the world capable of wielding a scalpel to pull her back from the clutches of death was the very sister she had destroyed. My father lunged towards me, trying to grab the hem of my blouse, but two nurses quickly restrained him. Dr. Irene, please, save your sister, she's dying. My father sobbed, his voice a desperate plea, a tone I never imagined this proud man would utter to me in my 32 years. I paused for a second before the operating room door. I turned, looked them straight in the eye, and offered a faint smile behind my mask. In this operating room, I don't have a sister. There's only a dying patient, and here I am, the law. The operating room door slammed shut in front of them, cutting short my mother's heart-wrenching cries. The red on-air light came on. The battle for life and death began, and this time I held the upper hand. The negative pressure room door slammed shut, swallowing up all the desperate cries and wails from the hallway. The space instantly fell into a deathly silence, broken only by the rapid, intermittent beeping of the heart monitor and the whirring of the ventilator. Blood pressure has dropped to 70/40, Dr. Woulette. The patient is in acute hemorrhagic shock due to a ruptured abdominal aorta. The anesthesiologist's voice rang out, filled with tension. I looked at the woman lying on the operating table. Gone was the image of a proud, pampered young lady. Gone was the calculating smile that had once ruined my life. Now Monica was just a mangled mass of flesh, her breath barely perceptible, the line between life and death as thin as a hair. A part of me, the traumatized 14-year-old abandoned child at the science fair, the ostracized sophomore, screamed, "Let her pay! Just a millimeter off the mark and justice will be served." But the pride of a surgeon and the soul of Sarah looking down from the sky held me back. I couldn't become the same murderer Monica had killed my future. I would save her. but I would save her so she would live and face the hell of her own making. Scalpel number 10. I commanded, my voice cold and devoid of emotion. The next 4 hours were a suffocating battle with death. Blood stained my rubber gloves crimson. Each time Monica's heartbeat flattened into a long straight line on the monitor, the entire operating room held its breath. I performed chest compressions manually, one beat after another, sweat streaming down my forehead and mixing with the blood that splattered onto my protective mask. The final stitch. Rearrange the intestines, close the abdomen. When the heart rate monitor stabilized at 110, I put down the surgical instruments. My hands trembled with exhaustion. I had pulled my greatest enemy back from the brink of death. 5 a.m. The first rays of dawn flickered through the hospital window. I stepped out into the hallway, removing my sweat-soaked mask. My parents rushed towards me like madmen. My mother knelt down, clutching my legs, tears of belated regret soaking the hem of her blouse. Irene. How is Monica? You saved her, didn't you? My father stood beside her, his thin shoulders trembling, his eyes now filled with no contempt but utter fear of the supreme power of his abandoned child. I looked down at them, pulling my leg away from my mother's embrace decisively. The surgery was successful. She's out of danger. But I paused, letting the silence gnaw at their patience. She'll wake up soon. And there's someone who really wants to see her. Who my father stammered. I stepped aside. From the dimly lit corner of the hallway, 2 Connecticut State Police officers emerged, each carrying a stack of files wrapped in sealed plastic bags. One of the officers said, "Mr. and Mrs. Woulette, right. We regret to inform you that Monica Woulette's accident was not accidental. She was driving under the influence after embezzling $1.2 million from a marketing company's account in Stamford. During the pursuit, she lost control on the highway. My mother's eyes widened and she stumbled backward. No, it can't be. Monica was so well behaved. She was the perfect daughter. That's not all. I interrupted, my voice, even as if reading a medical record. The officers also searched Monica's apartment as part of a financial investigation. And guess what they found in your perfect daughter's safe? I snatched the files from the officer's hand and threw them down on my father's chest. Papers fluttered across the hospital hallway floor. They were Sarah Mitchell's original medical records from 5 years ago. They were letters from the Oregon Medical University Administration to the Woulette family affirming my excellent student status, all intercepted by Monica in the mail. And most disgusting of all, Monica's diary, where she recorded every phone call with me, accompanied by frantic handwritten notes. Irene can't be better than me. She's just a shadow. I have to take back the #1 spot. I have to disgust her parents. My father picked up the papers, his old hands trembling so much he could barely hold them. He read Monica's words, the words of vindication that had been buried for half a decade. His face turned from pale to crimson with shame and shock. The idol he worshipped, the daughter he was so proud of, turned out to be a vicious monster, a thieving criminal. My father looked up at me, his eyes clouded with tears. Irene, Dad, I'm sorry. Mum and Dad were wrong. Please give us a chance to make amends. I looked at the man pleading before me. At 51, I had longed for this embrace, for this apology, with all my heart. But now, when it came, I felt only a ridiculous emptiness. Dead faith cannot be revived by a few belated tears. Atonement. I laughed, a dry laugh echoing through the empty hallway. What can you offer to atone for your sins? 5 years of humiliation as an orphan. The nights I wept uncontrollably beside Sarah's body without a single family member, or the empty seats at my wedding. My mother sobbed trying to grab my hand, but I stepped back, maintaining a dignified and cold distance. I saved Monica today, not because I still have any affection for this family. I saved her because I am a professional doctor, and I want her to live to wake up to wear her prisoner's uniform, to face the judgment of the law and the contempt of society. I turned my back, my white lab coat fluttering in the hallway breeze, proud and radiant like a goddess emerging from battle. Irene, where are you going? Don't leave your parents! My mother's voice cried out from behind. I stopped, but didn't turn around, uttering my final words, putting an end to this ill-fated relationship. You and Dad once said that the Woulette family only had Monica. Remember those words, because from today onwards, Dr. Irene Woulette will have no parents. I walked straight to my office, where my wonderful husband was waiting for me, with a warm cup of coffee, where a bright new life awaited me. Behind me, the lights in the recovery room were still on. Monica would have to live to pay the price, and my parents would have to live the rest of their lives tormented by guilt. I had won a glorious and clean victory. A week after the major surgery, Monica woke up. But she didn't wake up as an ordinary patient. Her intensive care unit was heavily guarded by 2 police officers. I walked into the room with the medical records in my hand. My parents were sitting by the bedside, looking 10 years older, their eyes vacant. Seeing me, Monica, her face covered in stitches and gasping for breath through the endotracheal tube, tried to glare at me. The hatred in her eyes remained like a venomous snake, even with its tail broken, still wanting to sink its fangs into someone. I pulled up a chair and sat down opposite them. The atmosphere was so stifling that I could hear the dripping of the IV drip. You all think the play is over, right? I smiled faintly, a smile that sent shivers down both my parents' spines. I calmly took a small glass vial from my blouse pocket, containing a dark brown tissue sample from a biopsy, and placed it next to Monica's heart monitor. Dr. Irene. What is that? My mother asked, trembling. I didn't look at her, my gaze fixed on Monica's rapidly turning pale face. During the surgery to remove a damaged lobe of Monica's liver, I discovered something very interesting. Her liver is severely cirrhotic, but not from alcohol, but from a small dose of arsenic poisoning over a long period. My father jumped up. Arsenic? You mean someone tried to poison Monica? No, Dad. I snarled each word like a sledgehammer blow. Monica drank it herself. All those times Mum made me hang up because she was having a bad day. Do you remember all those times she was overwhelmed with work stress? All those times Mum made me hang up because she was having a bad day. Monica trembled violently, her heart monitor beeping incessantly. Beep, beep, beep. She wanted to speak, but the breathing tube blocking her throat only produced pathetic rustling sounds. My father knelt beside the bed, burying his head in his hands and weeping in shame. My mother was speechless, realizing that the daughter she had adored for so long was actually a psychopath. I picked up the glass vial, put it back in my pocket, and turned to leave. But just as my hand touched the doorknob, I stopped. I turned halfway, revealing a mysterious glimpse under the dim light of the hospital room. Dad, Mum, and Monica too. There's one last thing I want to give you all before we never see each other again. I pulled out my personal phone and pressed play on an old recording. From the phone's speaker, a weak but serene voice rang out. That was the voice of my late best friend, Sarah Mitchell, recorded the night before she died. Irene, I know you found out that Monica blocked the letters and fabricated evidence to make your family ostracize you. I was planning to go to Connecticut to expose her, but you stopped me. You told me let her win this round. Only when I'm pushed to the brink, when my parents cut off my support, will I have a reason to be independent, to be strong, and to reach heights they'll never reach. And one day, I'll make them look up at me from the bottom of the mud. Irene, you're the smartest and most ruthless person I've ever known. Click. The recording cut off. The room fell into a silence more terrifying than death itself. My parents looked up at me, their eyes no longer filled with regret, but with utter horror. They realized that for the past 5 years, I hadn't been a pathetic victim sitting and crying in a dark corner. I knew everything. I saw through Monica's scheme from the beginning. But I chose to remain silent, chose to play the victim, turning my pain into leverage to climb to my current position as head of surgery. I patiently waited like a seasoned hunter for the day their family would crumble at my feet. I looked at the terrified expressions on their faces, subtly smirked, pushed open the door, and stepped out into the brightly lit hallway, leaving the 3 trembling figures in the shadows of the backstage area. I stepped out of the hospital lobby, taking a deep breath of the chilly morning air. My husband's black Porsche was already parked at the edge of the avenue. But just as I reached the ground, the phone in my pocket vibrated for a long time. An unknown number, no caller ID. I pressed answer. On the other end, there was no immediate reply, only the sound of wind whistling through the cracks in the door and a steady, chilling breath. "Congratulations, Irene," a low, familiar female voice said, making every cell in my skin freeze. "A perfect performance. You saved Monica's life, landed her in prison, and made her parents kneel at your feet. Our 5-year plan finally succeeded." I gripped the phone so tightly my fingertips turned white, my voice dropping to a hateful whisper. "You promised you'd never call this number again, Sarah." Yes. The person speaking to me on the phone, the one whose voice had just been heard on that suicide recording years ago, was Sarah Mitchell. The hospital's surveillance camera footage flashed through my mind. Your audience is probably wondering, how could a 3rd-year medical student single-handedly manipulate the system, falsify medical records, deceive an entire medical board, and stage such a perfect fake death? The answer is simple. I didn't do it alone. That year, when Sarah discovered Monica was secretly gathering evidence to ruin me, she gave me 2 choices. Either stand up and expose Monica and continue living a life constrained by her parents' favoritism, or turn Monica's lie into truth. Sarah was actually the illegitimate daughter of a pharmaceutical tycoon in Oregon, a man she hated intensely. She needed a fake death to escape his control and secretly inherit his vast fortune. As for me, I needed a legitimate reason to cut ties with my family, to receive secret funding from Sarah, to shed the shadow of my invisible child and climb to the top. Sarah Mitchell's death that year was a surgical masterpiece on paper. Her funeral was real, but the body in the coffin was just a silicone mannequin swapped in the morgue. "Do you blame her?" Sarah Oyce on the phone held a soft laugh. I looked back at the hospital glass door where Monica lay in the emergency room, helpless and crippled. It turned out that the cunning Monica, who thought she was the hunter, was actually just a pathetic pawn on a chessboard that Sarah and I had set up half a decade earlier. "It's over, Sarah," I said coldly. "Never show your face in Portland again. I'm the head of department, now I have a family, a clean career." Over, Sarah laughed, her laughter echoing eerily through the phone. "Irene, have you forgotten my fake medical records from that year, the signature of the resident who performed the body swap? They're still on my secure server. You think you've escaped the mire? No, we're accomplices, and I'm standing on the rooftop of the building across the street watching you." I jumped, looking up. Across the street on the rooftop of the shopping mall, a figure in a black trench coat stood silhouetted against the light, raising a hand in a suggestive wave. The call disconnected. Beep, beep, beep. I jumped, looking up. Across the street on the rooftop of the shopping mall, a figure in a black trench coat stood silhouetted against the light, raising a hand in a suggestive wave. The call disconnected. Beep, beep, beep. The call disconnected. Beep, beep, beep. I stood rooted to the spot on the hospital's stone steps. The dark figure on the rooftop of the opposite building lowered its hand slightly, then slowly retreated into the shadows of the upper floor. The morning breeze ruffled my blouse, but the chill that caressed my spine came from a different, horrifying truth. I no longer looked up at the rooftop. I bowed my head gently, touching the silver cufflink on my sleeve, where a micro camera with radio wave tracking was attached. I raised my phone to my ear and dialed an encrypted internal number, cybersecurity team, and federal police. Have you detected her location signal yet? From the other end of the line, the voice of the police colonel rang out, sharp and cold. Target locked. Sarah Mitchell, real name Eleanor Vance, a federal fraudster wanted for money laundering and manipulating the black market medical market. Special operations vehicles have surrounded the building across the street. Thanks for your cooperation, Dr. Woulette. I hung up, exhaling a thin wisp of smoke into the cold air. My audience, do you really think I'm a cold-blooded monster, willing to conspire with criminals to avenge my family? No. You underestimate a man who has sworn the Hippocratic Oath before the symbol of medicine. That year, when Sarah Mitchell presented her insane fake death scheme, I immediately realized she wasn't a poor, pathetic student. An orphan girl couldn't possibly have the connections to forge a death certificate, couldn't possibly have millions of dollars to fund me. She was a cunning old fox looking for a scapegoat with a clean record in the medical field to serve as a cover for her drug and equipment smuggling operation. I agreed to participate in her game, but not as an accomplice, but as an undercover agent. For the past 5 years, every penny Sarah sent to my account was secretly diverted, documented, and sent directly to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I endured the humiliation from my family, accepted playing the role of an outcast, all to make both Monica and Sarah believe they had completely manipulated me. And Monica's accident tonight. It was indeed an accident. But the reason Monica was being chased by the police and panicked driving off a cliff was because I secretly sent evidence of Monica's embezzlement of company funds to the police yesterday afternoon. I knew Monica had a habit of drinking when stressed. I knew she would flee. I calculated her exact route and prepared the operating room at my hospital. I saved Monica's life so she would have to testify in court exposing Sarah Mitchell's arsenic and drug trafficking ring. One arrow killing 2 old foxes who had once tried to trample on my life. Bang! A loud explosion rang out from the building across the street. Police sirens blared. Flashing red and blue lights ripped through the Portland city fog. I saw figures in black uniforms rushing into the building. My phone rang again. It was the police colonel. Dr. Woulette, something's wrong. The figure on the rooftop. It's just a remote-controlled mechanical doll with a transmitter of Sarah's voice. She's not there. My heart skipped a beat. Not there. We just checked the basement security cameras at your hospital 2 minutes ago. The officer's voice was strained with tension. A woman in a nurse's uniform just entered Monica Woulette's intensive care unit. It's Sarah. She's inside your hospital. I spun around, dashing through the glass door and running back into the hospital lobby. My footsteps pounded on the silent floor. If Sarah was in there, she wouldn't let Monica survive to testify. Even worse, she might kill both my parents to frame me, the only one with a motive for revenge. I rushed to the elevator door. The floor indicator was slowly ticking. Floor 3, floor 4. Monica's recovery room was on floor 5. I glanced toward the stairwell, pulled out the titanium scalpel I always kept hidden in my jacket pocket, my eyes blazing with rage. A man who had crawled up from the mud with blood and tears like me would never allow anyone to destroy the kingdom I had built.